was quiet on the home front, the cinema, and Movietone in particular, continued to pump out advice.
What to do in an air raid? Here are a few important rules to remember. Get under cover at once. Don't stand staring at the sky, take cover at once. But don't rush, take cover quietly, then others will do the same. If you're in the open with no cover, lie down. If your home is within 5 minutes, go there and take shelter. And keep away from windows. Admit passers-by, they need shelter too. Motorists, get off the main road, park close to the curb. Switch off headlamps, leave only side and rear lamps. Always carry your gas mask. See that your blackout is complete. Above all, don't stand staring at the sky. Take cover.
The fire service was a public body, was ready to go to anyone's assistance, whatever the problem. Horse fallen down a basement, a cat gone up a tree. We even had a little boy climbed up onto the seat of the toilet to see what the noise was coming from the cistern above. And he slipped and his foot jammed down in the pan of the lavatory. His mother tried vainly to pull his foot out, and she went outside to pick up a man in the street who said, have you got a hammer? And she said, what are you going to do? He said, well, break the pan, get the boy's foot out. No, you don't, she said. I'm going to send for the fire service. So she ran round the fire station and she called the firemen out. And the fire service has been used for many years to respond to these little domestic problems. And so the station officer, a man of considerable experience, just put his hand down, unlaced the boy's shoe, took his foot out of the shoe, and then retrieved the shoe afterwards, and the lavatory pan was saved.
In France, the French army manned the Maginot Line and waited. Impatient by nature, the Frenchman persuaded himself that Hitler never meant to attack. Said Hitler, the French army rotted on its feet. That may or may not be true. Then suddenly on April the 10th, the first blow was struck. Hitler occupied Denmark and invaded Norway. The Scandinavian countries who had made a creed of neutrality found themselves overrun by the Nazi aggressor without even a declaration of war. The short war in Norway led to the fall of Mr. Chamberlain.
On May the 10th, 1940, Winston Churchill became Britain's Prime Minister and formed an all-party coalition government. It was clear that Neville Chamberlain's policy of appeasement to Germany had been a complete disaster. Britain was at war, and the war was not going well. The British needed strong leadership. They hoped they'd got it in the old warrior Winston Churchill. The Labour Party refused to work under Chamberlain, who was forced to resign, but remained at the Churchill right hand. Labour leader Clement Attlee became Deputy Prime Minister.
Behind every appointment will be the personality of Mr. Churchill, inspiring, stimulating, driving.
Oh, it was great. It was great.
This is an incendiary bomb. It takes fire on impact and may burn 15 minutes. It will ignite anything in its vicinity. The stirrup hand pump is the best to deal with both bomb and fire. The barrel is placed in a bucket while another person runs out the hose. The nozzle can be adjusted to give a jet for use on the fire or a spray for use on the bomb itself. When using the jet, pump at 65 double strokes a minute, 35 for the spray. Keep low to attack the fire, there's less heat and smoke. The Browns at home. Suddenly an alarm, enemy aircraft are here, but the Browns are prepared to tackle the worst. An incendiary bomb hits the house. It burns very violently for the first minute, but after that it can be tackled. Brown goes to ascertain the damage and sends to Smith's next door for the pump they share. There's no panic. A bucket, always kept full, is placed outside the front door. Miss Smith arrives. She has received training from the local authorities, which you too can receive. Brown decides to operate the pump away from the heat and smoke. You'll notice how Miss Smith keeps as near the floor as possible and plays a jet of water on the heart of the fire to get it under control. Brown Jr. calls the fire brigade just in case. While the spray is on the bomb, the surroundings are kept wet and the bomb is doing no more damage. You'll notice Miss Smith is alternately using jet and spray. 3 or 4 families can club together to share the cost of a pump. They can apply to the local authorities for training. Now the spray has done its work. The bomb is almost out. Miss Smith finishes off the job. By being thus equipped to deal with the emergency, these people have saved their houses and perhaps their lives. You can do the same. It's up to you.
In May 1940, the war hotted up across the Channel when Hitler's forces overran neutral Holland in less than a week. Both the British and French armies were moved up into Belgium to stem the tide of the Nazi advance.
It was not to be. The Germans struck at the hinge in the French line and created a bulge. The bulge became a gap. Employing the savage technique of indiscriminately blasting cities from the air, they drove civilians before them to cause confusion in the Allies' lines. They broke through to the Channel coast, and when King Leopold of the Belgians surrendered his army, the BEF was encircled.
The British Expeditionary Force had been pushed back to the French port of Dunkirk. There was no alternative but to mount the greatest evacuation in the history of warfare.
Smoke from the fires of Dunkirk almost obscured the sun. But in this inferno, while the BEF and their French comrades held off the Nazis in an epic rearguard action, it was here that the yachts, motorboats and Saucy Janes performed magnificent feats of rescue. Many were lost, sunk or blown to bits or burnt, but the gallant armada carried out the task assigned to it. In vessels of all sizes and descriptions, 250,000 men, including the wounded, were embarked and brought home under the protection of the Royal Navy. Under their own power or in tow, the amazing boats of Dunkirk crossed the Channel with their valiant but exhausted passengers. Later, Londoners passing near the river saw the little ships arriving and gave them a cheer from the bridges. And at many places the craft were tied up by the score, their emergency war work very well done.
It took us a long time to get over Dunkirk.
If the mercy of Dunkirk exceeded our remotest hopes, the collapse of France exceeded our wildest misgivings. Premier Reynaud was eased out of his position so that Marshal Pétain and General Weygand might make terms with Hitler. The Parliament of the Third Republic met at Vichy to vote itself out of existence, and the new French government signed an armistice with Germany. Only General de Gaulle and a remnant of gallant Frenchmen elected to carry on the struggle beside Britain. At this crisis in our history, when the possibility of invasion seemed very near, the Home Guard was born. 1.5 million volunteers were enrolled to stand guard against parachutists and fifth columnists, while regular troops prepared to defend the beaches. I suppose we shall always remember the emotions of June and July this year, when it seemed that any day we might be assailed by the Nazi hordes and the soil of Britain become the new scene of conflict for our battalions.
They asked us to join the Home Guard at the GC, Osrams it was called, then in Hammersmith, Osrams. So nearly everybody joined the Home Guard, those who were able to. And time, of course, I got asked to join the night firebots, in which we did.
Indeed, there is a new army drilling in our midst, the Broomstick Army. Squads of keen young patriots who have waited for months their turn to be called up and are now voluntarily drilling with broomsticks instead of weapons. From civilian veterans, they learn the rudiments of drill, and some large part of their training will be complete by the time they are called up.